A little over 120 years ago, the 1903 Wright Flyer, the world's first airplane, took flight. At 21 feet long with a wingspan of 40 feet, this wood, muslin, and aluminum biplane was a beast to behold. Today, however, it's been well and truly eclipsed by its successors, both in terms of size and prowess. From planes that launch literal spaceships to flying fortresses, it's time to strap in as we look at some of the largest and strangest planes that actually exist. Ecrino Plan of Attack.
We've all got that friend who claims they've seen a ghost, alien, or sea monster. But what if that weird friend was the US military? In 1966, a spy satellite spotted something strange and gigantic in the Caspian Sea. The creature wasn't Nessie or the Kraken, but a Loon-class Ikranoplan. 50% plane, 50% boat, and 100% beast. The thing freaked out the Americans so much they dubbed it the Caspian Sea Monster.
The very first prototype of this Soviet plane measured in at 302 feet long, with a wingspan of 148 feet and a weight of 380 tons, roughly the same as two Boeing 747 passenger jets.
The Ikranoplan first entered service in 1987 and was built to take down NATO nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers. Pretty impressive, but what the heck is an Ikranoplan? An Ikranoplan travels by hovering 6 to 20 feet off the water or ground in a phenomenon known as wing-in ground effect, an effect that generates a cushion of air beneath the craft, allowing for a stable and fast flight over flat terrain or water. Its low flight would make it undetectable to enemy radar, allowing it to ferry troops in secret. More than 100 planes were supposed to be deployed, but the end of the Cold War in the 1990s left only a handful in existence. But the machine's time might not be over just yet. Developers are taking a whack at reviving the Ikranoplan. This is the Airfish 8 prototype from Singapore company WidgetWorks, and this is an autonomous flying craft from the American Flying Ship Company. Both would use similar technology to the Ikranoplan, gliding smoothly above the water. Looks like the monster might be rising from the grave after all.
It's Super Guppy! A lot of planes are designed with air resistance in mind, so they appear sleek and graceful. But the same cannot be said for the Super Guppy. This bizarrely bulbous behemoth is 143 feet long, 46 feet high, and boasts a wingspan of 156 feet. You've probably also noticed its incredible cargo bay, which really makes it look like it should see a doctor. The 108-foot-long cargo deck is designed for the transport of other smaller planes and even rockets, with the bulbous bay allowing it to carry a useful load of up to 54,000 pounds. Now, for a cargo plane, that's not a lot, with large cargo jets and freighters able to carry up to 10 times that amount. However, the Guppy can load its cargo easily because its nose hinges open 110 degrees. Allowing large items to be onboarded without obstruction. The plane's bizarre blueprint was thought up in the early 60s by John M. Conroy, a former United States Air Force pilot who'd heard that NASA needed a plane with a cargo bay big enough to store a 40-foot-long rocket. Conroy thought that it would be possible to graft a bubble structure onto a B-377, a long-range Boeing airliner. By the end of the project, Conroy and his team had transformed the B-377, making the fuselage, which is to say the main body of the plane, 20 feet higher. That big bulbous head opens up like a door, allowing for large materials to be easily heaved in. NASA naysayers thought that the plane would be too awkward to fly, with one official saying the design looked like a pregnant guppy. See where they got the name? The Proto-Guppy proved them all wrong when it successfully took off on the 19th of September, 1962. The triumph of the plane led to the creation of the Super Guppies that take up so much space in the sky today. The current model boasts a bigger fuselage and cockpit pressurization that lets it soar to altitudes of 25,000 feet. NASA took the machine on, and just as Conroy hoped, the Super Guppy transported parts used in the Apollo program. Even to this day, the Super Guppy continues to support NASA and the Department of Defense. Looks like dreams can really come true. If you've got enough money to build an experimental superplane, that is. If you want to fulfill all my dreams, why not click those like and subscribe buttons? That way you can keep up with all my latest and greatest content. Now let's move on to another freaky flyer. A Herculean aircraft. Back in 1942, the Americans had just joined the fight in World War II, and German U-boats were taking down U.S. ships as they transported supplies across the Atlantic to their European allies. Howard Hughes was an eccentric billionaire. To help with the war effort, he decided to build an aircraft like no other. The Hughes H-4 Hercules, the biggest flying boat the world had ever seen. At 320 feet across, its wingspan is wider than the Statue of Liberty is tall, giving it the longest wingspan of its day. Its fuselage measures 218 feet long, 79 feet high, and it weighs a colossal 400,000 pounds. Its interior was so cavernous that it could carry 750 occupants, and was powered by 8 prop engines. Quite the sight, though not everybody was impressed. Hughes's incessant need for perfection meant that his master plane wasn't complete until 1946, by which time the war was already over. Construction of the plane cost $23 million, which is $340 million in today's dough. Why? Well, wartime restrictions on aluminum along with its colossal size meant it couldn't be made from the lightweight metal. So, keeping its size and takeoff weight in mind, it had to be made from wood. Obviously, this meant it required extensive design work to ensure it didn't break apart or burst into flames mid-flight. This led critics to jeeringly call it the Spruce Goose, even though it's actually made from birch. But despite its hulking size, this plane could still travel 2,600 nautical miles, or 3,000 regular miles, not that it ever got that far. On the 2nd of November 1947, the Goose took off for 26 seconds for 1 mile at an altitude of 70 feet above the water. To date, this is the only flight the plane has ever completed. Today, you can visit it at the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in Oregon, USA. Whale of a plane. Whenever I go out for groceries, I need at least 2 carts to haul all my food. Hey, I'm a hungry boy. Instead of an extra cart, though, maybe what I need is the Airbus Beluga XL. Now this is a gargantuan cargo carrier. It's 207 feet long, 62 feet high, and has a wingspan of 197 feet. If that weren't enough, the plane's fuselage volume is 78,010 cubic feet, roughly the same as the inside of a hot air balloon. The Beluga XLs entered service in 2019 and are expected to replace the current fleet of old Beluga ST crafts, which were first introduced in October 1995, by 2025. But why are the Beluga STs getting taken to the scrap heap? Well, the European Aerospace Corporation Airbus needs big aircrafts to lug large plane parts to their assembly points in Toulouse, France, and Hamburg, Germany. Airbus first used our old friend the Super Guppy to haul parts before the Beluga ST, but the rise in larger commercial aircrafts meant even larger cargo planes were needed to transport even larger parts. By 2013, it was clear that Airbus needed bigger orders to fill and began the XL program in November 2014.
The development of new models cost €1 billion, or roughly $1.12 billion.
Whoa, you could buy lots of berets, pasta, Alphorns, and other stereotypically European things with that much cash. The XLs were welcomed to the world after completing their maiden flight on the 19th of July 2018, and all that extra bulk means they can carry 30% more than the meager Beluga ST, giving a total payload of 48.5 tons. Just imagine all the food it could fit in there. I'd never go hungry again. Rock Planester. People sure love going into space, but we often forget about how much manpower and machine power it takes to get there. However, one plane that's definitely doing its part is the Stratolaunch Rock. It measures in at an extraordinary 238 feet long, 50 feet in height, and has a wingspan of 385 feet. Not only is that wingspan longer than a football field, it's the longest wingspan in the world. Its lofty size earned it the nickname of the Rock after the mythic bird of legendary proportion. But why does this bird need to be so big? Well, it was the brainchild of Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen. In early 2011, Allen wanted to use his mighty billion-dollar fortune to build an aircraft that could carry other planes and rockets. Allen's company, Stratolaunch Systems, joined forces with Scaled Composites to construct such a plane. Sadly, Allen passed away before he could see his aircraft fly, but Stratolaunch Systems was bought by Cerberus Capital, who sped up research and development. The Rock was cobbled together using two Boeing 747-400 jumbo jets. Wow, manufacturers really like Frankensteining their planes, don't they? After all that blood, sweat, and tears, the plane successfully flew on the 13th of April 2019. Since then, the Rock has completed 9 test flights in the Mojave Desert. While you might think that this slender plane would snap like a toothpick under any sort of weight, it can actually carry up to 500,000 pounds. That's the same as 2 blue whales, which, as we all know, is a very common payload. Eventually, the plane will use its 6 turbofan engines to carry 3 rockets to an altitude of 30,000 feet. If it can carry huge rockets like that with only 6 engines, imagine what it could carry with 50. I kid. Unless there's another billionaire out there willing to make this a reality. Heavy metal. Oh, you thought the planes we've covered so far were huge? Well, you ain't seen nothing yet. Let's head back to 1988 Soviet Ukraine, where the Antonov Company had just built the staggeringly sized An-225. The plane would be one of its kind with size and strength that bowled the world over. It was nicknamed Mriya, Ukrainian for dream. And what a dream it was. The Mriya was the heaviest plane ever built at the time, with a maximum takeoff weight of some 1,323,000 pounds. The plane was 275 feet long, 59 feet high, and had a wingspan of 290 feet. But why make a plane so huge? Well, it was made for carrying massive weighty objects like trains and the Buran space orbiter. But not only was this thing the Schwarzenegger of aircrafts, it also set several world records. On June 16, 2004, the plane set 6 records by flying with 247 tons of cargo from Prague, Czech Republic to Tashkent, Uzbekistan. The Mriya would go on to set another record on the 10th of June, 2010 by transporting 2 wind turbine blades measuring 138.1 feet, the longest freight item ever carried by air. The success of the plane impressed China so much it planned on joining with Ukraine to make a second gargantuan plane. However, at time of writing, this second Antonov has yet to be finished.
As you've probably guessed from my use of past tense, the dream sadly ended in 2022 when the only completed Mriya was destroyed in an attack on Hostomel Airport.
Until its destruction, it was the longest-serving aircraft in the world. This wasn't the only massive plane the Antonov Company produced, however. The Antonov AN-124 Ruslan first saw service in 1986 when 55 crafts were built. The plane has a wingspan of 240 feet, 226 feet long, and 69 feet high, making it taller than the Cinderella Castle at Disneyland. Which one contains more munitions, however, is anyone's guess. Much like its big brother, the Ruslan is also a cargo plane, though its maximum takeoff weight lies around 890,000 pounds, more than 400,000 pounds less than the An-225. So while they both look big, there's roughly the weight of an entire empty 747 jumbo jet between these two behemoths. Talk about a big difference. The Sky Giant. Have you ever worked hard on something only to discover it's completely useless? It's a tragic feeling. For example, I spent 2 years trying to perfect my soup taco to no avail. Still, even my pain pales in comparison to what Airbus must have felt after finishing the Airbus A380. The double-decker quadjet was developed to compete with the Boeing 747's chokehold on the market and successfully spread its wings on January 18, 2005. Its great size earned it the nickname the Giant of the Skies, which was also the nickname the flight attendants gave me the last time I flew. The plane measures in at 239 feet long, 79 feet high, and has a wingspan of 261 feet. With an 853-person capacity, the Airbus is the biggest plane in the world by passenger volume. That's a whole lot of butts on seats. In fact, that's 279 more people than the largest IMAX screen in the world, which can seat 574 people. Before you start having cramped nightmares, know that no airline has actually traveled with 853 people on board. Most flights take off with around 480 to 520 passengers. All in all, you'd think Airbus would be pretty pleased with their big old plane. Look how it compares to their A318. It looks like a toddler next to that monster. Size isn't everything though. The A380 can't travel as far as the smaller, more efficient Airbus A350-1000. Jeez. This company needs to get a little more creative with their names. While the A380 can travel over 9,200 miles, the A350 can manage a little over 10,000. What's more, it turns out that the A380 is a real fuel guzzler, consuming 4,600 gallons of fuel per hour. When the 2020 pandemic rolled in, it grounded millions of planes. Many airlines, except Emirates, discontinued the A380's use and replaced it with the much younger, zestier A350. I can sympathize. My ex-wife replaced me with a more impressive model, too. One pricey plane. If you like spending insane amounts of money on ridiculous projects, then I've got the story for you. Also, please DM me. I have an amazing taco soup idea that's a surefire hit. Our tale begins with the C-5M Super Galaxy. This military cargo plane is 247 feet long, 65 feet high, and has a wingspan of 222 feet. A beast, to be sure. The C-5M is so big that it won't fit into most hangars. The Air Force has to allow for holes in the building doors for the plane's tail to stick out of. The C-5M can carry 281,001 pounds, enough for 1 tank, 6 helicopters, or for the table tennis fanatics among you, 24,844,746 ping pong balls. But it wasn't always so easy for the C-5M. Now, in 1965, U.S. forces needed a supersized plane to transport combat equipment for the Vietnam War. The Lockheed Corporation stepped up to the plate, but it turned out to be an accursed task. Firstly, construction was hit by delays after cracks were found in the experimental plane wings. Lockheed went over budget by $2 billion, bringing its budget to $5.1 billion total, which is over $39 billion today. Eventually, Lockheed created the C-5 Galaxy, and it was welcomed to the world with a maiden voyage on June 30th, 1968. The C-5 was put to work immediately, carrying troops, tanks, helicopters, and other military equipment. Despite early hiccups, the plane is now worth its weight in gold. It's been utilized in every major conflict the U.S. has ever been involved in since its inception, which is to say a lot. The older C-5 planes have now either been upgraded to become C-5Ms or retired. Tough luck. The new craft certainly puts the super in supersized. With 120,000 pounds of cargo, the plane can still fly up to 5,524 miles. The C-5M doesn't even need to land. With aerial refueling, the plane is limited only by the crew's endurance. The C-5M is so good that it's expected to be operational until 2040. Just shows what a real American can do, if they spend around $39 billion on self-improvement. A soaring reputation. There are times when I've been driving around and suddenly realized I desperately needed to refuel. No, not on gas, on snacks. Maybe I should invest in one of these bad boys. The C-17 is an enormous 4-engine aircraft with 2 on each wing, used to ferry around military equipment via this big front end opening hatch. Looks roomy. The first C-17 was designed by aerospace company McDonnell Douglas in 1980 when the United States Air Force desired a plane that could refuel mid-flight, allowing them to fly anywhere in the world. At 174 feet long, 55 feet high, and with a wingspan of 169 feet, a maximum takeoff weight of 585,000 pounds, this thing is almost twice the weight of a standard single-story house. The C-17 had its first maiden voyage on the 15th of September 1991 and has been a helpful ally to many countries ever since. In 1998, 8 C-17s completed the longest airdrop mission in history, flying more than 8,000 nautical miles, or 9,206 landlubber miles, from the USA to Central Asia, releasing troops and gear after more than 19 hours in the air. Impressive! The C-17 even accompanies the U.S. President as he travels the world like a big loyal dog. In August 2021, during the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Reach 871 took approximately 640 Afghan evacuees from Kabul to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the most people ever carried in a C-17. The plane is also something of a star, appearing in films and TV such as Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, American Sniper, and Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Dang, I guess this massive plane is a little too high profile to help me refill on snacks. Copycraft. I remember in school there was always this one kid who copied everyone's work, and he drove the class crazy. Why am I bringing this up? Well, the Soviet Union did pretty much the same thing when they designed one of their planes. In 1966, Sergei Ilyushin was part of a team tasked with creating a plane like the American Lockheed C-141A Starlifter, which was a very effective airlift plane. But the Soviet version needed to be able to take off from unpaved airports in the Arctic and eastern Siberia. If you've ever had a plane delayed due to snow, you know that's no easy task. The plane also needed a range of at least 3,100 miles and to be able to lift around 73,000 pounds. Cripes! That's the equivalent of flying a 20-car payload from LA to New York and still having a little gas left in the tank. That's a big ask. And after some hard work, the big Ilyushin Il-76 was born. It was named after its daddy, and he must have been proud because the Il-76 was one gargantuan baby. Look at this thing. The aircraft was 152 feet long, 48 feet high, and a wingspan of 165 feet and could carry more than 92,500 pounds. That's almost 20,000 pounds more than they needed. Yet the team didn't quite meet all their specifications. The Ilyushin's range was only 2,700 miles, not 3,100. Still, that's better than any plane I've ever built. The plane would later be utilized in the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, where it made 14,000 flights and transported 89% of all troops and 74% of all air freight. The Ilyushin was dubbed the world's biggest firefighter aircraft by the Iranian government after helping them quench forest fires on the Khoi-Sulman mountain range. And here's the plane in action dumping water on a Chilean bushfire.
Y ahí está lanzando el agua justo encima del foco del fuego.
It's also a difficult target to shoot down, due to its ability to fly at a dizzying height of 50,850 feet, at least 8,000 feet higher than most commercial passenger planes. This plane isn't one you'd want to mess with, as some military variants like the Il-76 MD-23 are armed with 2 machine guns in the rear turrets for defensive purposes. Suddenly I don't feel like confronting this copycat. Yeah, no, take it, it's fine. Totally fine. Master Schmidt. Let's go back to an era that brought about all sorts of wild weapons, the Second World War. German forces were attempting to invade Britain, but they needed a big vehicle to carry forces across the Channel. In October 1940, German manufacturer Messerschmitt were told to design a large transport glider that could land on English soil, and they had just 2 weeks to do it. And so Messerschmitt created the Me-323 Gigant, a stocky flying bruiser that was 92.5 feet long, 33 feet high, with a wingspan of 181 feet. It weighed over 30 tons, and that was its empty weight. The Me-323 could haul 100 soldiers, a tank, an armored vehicle, or a large caliber field gun, whatever took the Germans' fancy. Made predominantly of a wooden frame, which was lightweight enough for its massive fuselage to fly, the Gigant was able to withstand the violent assault of machine gun fire, which I'm sure the Germans appreciated. Though it wasn't all plain sailing or flying for this craft, despite being made of wood, it was still incredibly heavy, which meant that it wasn't the nimblest of machines. Plus, its engines, cockpit, and fuel stores weren't covered by that frame, making them very vulnerable targets. I'm beginning to understand why we don't see these things anymore. Complete impracticality isn't the only reason they're not around today, though. On April 22, 1943, 27 Me-323s were being escorted by Bf-109s near Sicily, but were ambushed by 7 squadrons of Spitfires and P-40s, attack planes. Only 6 of the 27 Me-323s survived, and after the war ended, it was believed that all the Gigants had been destroyed. Still, for a warplane that size made of wood that was designed and built in a matter of weeks, it's a miracle it lasted as long as it did. Just plain jealous. Imagine this. You've just successfully flown across the Atlantic for the first time in human history. It's a triumph and major success. One no one believed was possible. And 2 weeks later, 2 British guys do the exact same thing. To make matters worse, they get all the credit. This is the story of American pilot Albert C. Reed, who accomplished this incredible feat in the Curtiss NC-4 in 1919. If flying across the Atlantic isn't enough for you, the NC-4 is also the Guinness World Record holder for world's biggest biplane. A biplane is an aircraft with 2 wings stacked above one another. The NC-4, or Nancy boat as it's also called, is 68 feet long, 24 feet high, and has a wingspan of 126 feet, and an operational weight of 26,400 pounds. Its predecessor, the NC-1, set the precedent for just how big this plane was in 1918 by carrying 51 passengers in a single flight, a world record at the time. It was far from a roomy flight, though, if those people straddling the engines are anything to go by. The NC-4 had the NC-1's 4-engine layout, with all 4 NC biplanes built for the U.S. Navy to sink German submarines during the World War. These planes never felt the full rage of battle, however, as the war ended before they could be widely used. Reed flew his Nancy boat for 24 days after takeoff from the Naval Air Station at Rockaway Beach, New York on the 8th of May, 1919. Along the way, he took intermittent stops before landing in Plymouth, England on the 31st of May, 1919. What an accomplishment, right? Well, on the 14th of June 1919, aviators John Alcock and Arthur Whitten Brown flew non-stop from Newfoundland to Ireland in under 72 hours and won a 10,000-pound prize, which is over $500,000 today. In 1974, the Nancy boat was retired and placed in the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida, where it can still be seen today. Reed's achievement was overshadowed, and today it's Alcock and Brown whom people are most likely to remember. Funny, I wouldn't have thought something as big as the Nancy boat could ever be overshadowed. Well, those were some weirdly big planes. Which of these monstrous machines made your heart soar? And were there any aircraft I missed out? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.